All right. Welcome, everybody. So I'm Keith Mathis. If you're not familiar with who I am, I'm based out of Springfield, Missouri. Keith Mathis of the Mathis Group. We've been 30 plus years doing this. And so this week, we're going to be talking about empowerment, shifting authority and responsibility to the project team. So you should be seeing a slide on your side, and so hopefully you're hearing everything real well. Let me talk about something though that's really difficult and which caused me to think about this particular topic. We talk the talk of giving authority to the team. We talk the talk of decision making being made by the team, and then what we see so many times is project managers will trump all the decisions that are made, or management will come in and trump all those decisions. And so when we talk about this today, it doesn't mean that we never trump a decision. Obviously, there are decisions that will need to be trumped by somebody higher in authority, by management or by executives or whatever. But sometimes you see people who they're so caught up on making the decision that all of this is nothing but window dressing and discussion. And so they talk about empowering the team, but they make every decision. And so over time, if you've worked in those situations, as many of you I know have, over time, what will happen is the team stops making decisions because the boss or the project manager or the manager or the executive is always making that decision or trumping the decision they make. So that was what really caused this to think about this is how can we speed a project up? How can we get more decision making down to the team level? And those of you who are doing Scrum and Agile are needing this like yesterday is what you're needing to be able to do. So let's start off with defining empowerment in the context of project management, because that's the direction we're really trying to do and to go, is so that the people who are working on the project are able to make as many decisions as possible, maybe not all, but many as possible, to be able to speed the project up. So here's your definition for empowerment. It refers to the transitioning of decision-making authority, responsibility, and leadership from management to team members. This is not a delegation that allows the team to make decisions under the manager's authority. It's a complete authority shift. So a transition in that direction really would be that you're the manager, and so you delegate authority for people to make decisions, within certain parameters, but they're constantly reporting back to you and telling you what they're going to decide. You're approving it, and they're doing it. That can be a transition period, but that still slows the project down. Those of you who are moving into the Agile and Scrum arena, you know that the decision-making power of the team making the decision and being able to speed that project up is enormous. And so that's one of the reasons why you're wanting that power and authority to be able to be switched over to that team so that they call the shot, they make the decision, and they're able to move forward. If we're in situations where we're always having to run something up line to have 15 people say yes to, you can forget that project speeding up. It's just the sheer nature of our culture is going to sabotage so much of that. So we've got to be able to start doing this. And this is not something that just happens tomorrow. This is something you're having to do over time because these people are needing some training and equipping and coaching in some of these areas. So when we talk about empowerment, it impacts the psychological mindset of the team because they're interpreting the situation, they're making the decision. So this isn't them fulfilling what you want them to do. This is them making the decision of what needs to be done. And so making decision breeds that mindset, a desire to support the team members to drive success, and because they're making that decision. So the team has the capability of thinking through what the solution is, coming to a consensus on the solution, and then moving forward to put that solution into practice. So let's start with understanding some of the benefits of this. Many times when we talk with people, we talk like we want to make that shift, but it's so much about what we do is that we don't do it. We sabotage it, or we get people going in that direction, and then we bring some of that power back. But there's some benefits for this. Reduction of management bottlenecks. Most of our projects struggle in so many different areas, and the reason is because we're constantly having to ask permission for stuff. The more we go into Agile and Scrum, and those of you who are doing it on a daily basis already know, Agile and Scrum, the team is making 99% of the decisions. It's under the umbrella, obviously, of executives, and the team understands what the goals, objectives, strategic plan is, all of those type of things. So the team is going to be very high functioning in making those decisions. Not that they don't report back to management, not that they don't report back to executives, but they're calling the shot most of the time, and they're letting them know how things are moving. So reduction of management bottlenecks. Also, ownership, intrinsic motivation from your employee. They're making the decision. They're going to drive it much more with more of a motivated spirit in trying to complete that. Executives focus on strategic rather than tactical, and that's what your team is functioning on. Tactical. What do we need to do to get this done? What do we need to do to reach this objective, reach this goal? What do we need to do to provide this feature to the customer? So reduction of management bottlenecks. So first off, faster and more responsive decision making. We've all been caught in that situation where you're waiting for somebody to make a decision. And so you kind of feel like you're treading water on some of those situations. The idea that those closest to the decision make the decision is not a bad philosophy. Now, there's always exceptions to everything we talk about here in our webinars. There's always going to be an exception, but don't make the 1% exception the 99% of how we respond. There's always going to be somebody trump something. There's always going to be somebody who knows something new. There's always going to be new information. There's going to be all those types of things. But you really do want your team making most of those decisions because they're the experts. They're doing the job on a daily basis. Time typically is reduced and adjustments can be faster when needed because your team is calling the shot and they can have it done many times before we even get a decision made back. Team internalizes the organizational culture and setting of the team and the project. And so what happens, the team really is tag teaming to solve problems. They're not waiting for management to come up with a solution and then they're the worker bees. They are the people coming up with the idea and with the solution as well. The team internalizes the organizational culture. And then also each member learns the priorities for the organization and begins supporting it. They become solution solvers. Problem solvers with solutions. They become those type of people. And so you're not having to spoon feed them everything that we're talking about. There's ownership and intrinsic motivation. That was one of the components a moment ago. So psychological ownership makes everyone feel like their contribution matters. Why? Because they've made a decision, they've come up with a solution, they put it into practice, they're able to measure did it work or not. Same thing that executives do with their solution. We all do that. You come up with an idea, a solution, you put it into practice, didn't quite fix everything. So what do? You come up with another solution to fix those other things. Here you're doing it at the decision-making level where the worker bees are. They're making the most of those decisions. It breeds that accountability. Accountability follows the entrustment with authority. So the teams tend to monitor their individual performance. The teams challenge themselves for continuous improvement and admitting mistakes. So this is not something to where we've just got another group of people to blame. And so we have the whipping post, next Monday because we made a bad decision. I guarantee you the team knows if they made a bad decision and they can talk about it and put those steps into place to critique it, just like we do at the management level when we make a bad decision. Also, executives focus on strategic rather than tactical. Now, there's always an exception to this where you have some executives who can drill down really easy, but why would we want executives doing this all the time? We would really want the team being able to do this. So when authority is transferred to the team, executives are free of the routine of the project decisions, and they're looking at project outcomes. They're looking at the strategic piece of, is this project driving that initiative that we want? Plans are redirected toward long-term value creation. Potential leaders begin to surface from low-risk possibilities. Executives function more like mentors and coaches by bridging the training and knowledge gaps. By making this shift, what you're doing is you're putting the executives back in the role that they really work the best in, and that's as a mentor and a coach. And that way, they're basically a cheerleader for that team coming along. And so as they look and see that the team needs additional training, they bring training in. As they need more coaching, they have coaching in. They have a lot of the camaraderie there for people to train each other. So you see those kind of things, but they're not making all those decisions, so it frees them up to be more strategic focused. Let's talk about trust, because the main reason, and I suspect this, the main reason we don't allow people to make decisions is we don't trust their decision. And so obviously it's not a flipping the switch tomorrow that you're starting to make decisions. Many of you have children or that maybe went off to college. And so one of the things that I always think about was when you got ready to send your kids off to college, it wasn't like you made every decision for them. And then on Monday, they're heading to college and they're going to live on campus and all of this kind of stuff, making their own decisions. If that happened, decision, then you know that's a horrible outcome because they've never made a decision. Now they're making all their decisions, and mom and dad are not there. And so it's the same kind of idea when you think about a team. If all of a sudden tomorrow they're going to make all their decisions and they've never made a decision, you're building to that decision-making part so that people are making those decisions and making better decisions over time because you're building that maturity in. And trust starts going up. You've made good decisions in the past. So building trust and accountability within the team. So let's look at changing the internal culture. If our culture has been a permission kind of culture where everything has to have a permission, every time you turn around, the leadership is the ones that have to make every decision, and there are those cultures that really have that strong hold on, then you're not going to speed some of your projects up and get them delivered faster typically, because unless that person who is making that decision is ingrained into the project, you've got to get the decision-making power closer to the project. And that's why allowing your team to do it is going to help you. So a couple of things that will help you for this. So change the internal culture to include two things: trust and accountability. Train them, equip them, coach them, become their cheerleader, and allow them to start feeling that trust, and they'll make good decisions. When bad decisions are made, you're going to do just like you do with your executives. What did we learn from this? What would we do different? You're going to do your lessons learned or your retrospective. And then what you're going to discover is that people are learning from those particular pieces, and they will actually be better down the road. Accountability is not turning that event into a whipping post because they made a wrong decision or a decision or gave a solution that wasn't as perfect as it should be. We all have done those types of things. And so, but accountability is what are you going to do next? What's your next steps? What do you think needs to happen? And that causes that growth part to happen with that team. And so what happens over time is they're able to have camaraderie among the team, come up with a better solution because people are being able to talk about it and then move forward. So that culture shifts from one of fear to one of trust, and that changes the whole dynamic of everything. And so on the trust side, the team will act with integrity, good intentions, and the management sees that. They're not fearful of that they're going to lose their job at the drop of a hat because they made a bad decision, because nobody's going to make perfect decisions. And then on the accountability side, the team follows through on commitments. If they care about their team members, they care about the decisions that are being made. So with trust and accountability, believes the team will act with integrity, good intentions. Accountability anticipates that people will follow through on commitments, and the team will take ownership of the results. Now, by doing this over time, you'll start seeing your people are just making decisions and putting out fires, and they might be reporting to you and letting you know what's happened the last 2 or 3 days, but they're not asking permission. That's the piece that you're wanting to be able to shift away from you. They're not asking permission. Sure, you need to know what's going on. Sure, you need to know about the hiccups because they give a report. Here's what's happening. Here's what we've done about it. It looks like it's working. And so that's perfect. That's exactly the perfect scenario for you. You have actually duplicated yourself or multiplied yourself. And so leadership that cannot multiply themselves is going to be in a very difficult time because there's only so much of you that can answer questions and make decisions. So you've got to be able to duplicate yourself with those that are working around you. And predominantly, it's going to be some of these teams. The other side is when there's no trust and accountability, excessive oversight slows the entire workflow down, and especially in project management. I don't trust your decisions, so I'm going to guard every decision and spoon feed it to you. I don't trust that you'll do the work, so I'm going to watch you like a hawk. I mean, that gets old over time, and you have to really look at yourself honestly. If I've got an employee that's not wanting to work and be accountable for stuff, do I really need that employee in the first place? You're investing more time in their job than they are. And so there might be a person where you have to say, you know what? I think we've decided that somebody needs to leave, because that's not what you want. You want that person who cares about the job, who cares about making a decision, who you can switch this over. So micromanagement reduces innovation because there's a lack of trust. I'm going to spoon feed you every answer. I'm going to answer everything. Now, we're not talking about a brand new employee. A brand new employee doesn't know anything. They don't know you. They don't know your culture. They don't know your goals. They don't know your company. Of course, they've got that learning curve that has to be there. But sometimes we're doing this with seasoned professionals who have worked for us for years. All right, so let's do a little bit deeper dive into trust. Ensuring that trust does not slide into complacency because it's a healthy culture and people are respected. So trust kind of has several components to it, and this isn't necessarily all of it, but we do. It's healthy in the organization because we trust each other. I believe what you're telling me is true. I believe the decision you're making is the best decision that you think it is for that moment. And so I trust those particular things. Now, it might not be the best decision. So we learn from that. But I trust that for you, you thought it was the best decision. Teams build self-sustaining systems to support their decisions. Counting on each other becomes the culture. And so what happens is your team is tag teaming that thing together to make sure they solve that problem. Many of you are very blessed with teams that have a lot of these components. They are going that extra mile. They are tag teaming it and working together, and they do trust each other. They can share or disagree agreeably in a meeting, and nobody's offended by this because you're not a hothead and you're not a jerk when you're doing this. You're just bringing up, what about this? And we talk about that risk or that scenario. The other part of that is that accountability side. Expectations for each person and role is clear. Ambiguity is reduced. Team members are encouraged to be proactive with communication, with ideas. So if you don't agree in the team, you say you don't agree, and here's why. And the team banters that around to see whether or not they can solve that. Also, admitting a mistake is allowable. If someone says, I didn't do that, I didn't even think about that. The team is not. It's not like we're gonna put the pressure on that person because they made a mistake. It's what can we do as a team to be able to turn this thing around? And so that accountability is that it's accountability personally, but it's mutual accountability that we have as well. So let's go a little further here. So what do we do when we have broken trust? We don't trust our people. Maybe there's been some mistakes. Maybe they don't trust us because we've gone in different directions. So let's talk about that a little bit. So broken trust can happen because of missed deadlines, ethical issues, interpersonal conflict. A lot of those things cause us to question the scenario. You recognize the signs of broken trust and address them. And some of the most common signs is going to be withdrawal, passive aggressive kind of behavior, or avoidance, to where people don't want to make the decision. They let you make the decision because you're in leadership. Those are not the characteristics you want. That typically shows that they're not comfortable in that environment making the decision. So that's one of the reasons why that trust has broken down. When people start feeling like you trust them, and you might even have to verbally reinforce it from time to time. You make the decision. You guys are closer to that decision than I am, and you guys are really the experts on that. Also discuss the harm of not repairing trust, which requires policies and creating a clear change plan and all these other things. A lot of times what happens is some of our policy and procedures is because of some of the breaking down of trust. You're wanting to increase trust, which is going to increase motivation for your people and probably decrease some of the turnover. Also revise roles and commitments, which can prevent repetitive breakdowns as well, because those repetitive breakdowns are going to be something that's going to be pretty tough. So if you don't mind, I'm hearing somebody with their microphone. If you don't mind, turn your microphone off if you don't mind. Thank you so much. It's coming through. You probably didn't even know you were on, I'm sure. So let's go and talk a little more about repairing broken accountability. So strategic reframing of accountability. Culture is not punitive in oversight. Executives champion the idea of faster decisions, which accelerates the execution. And then efficiencies and speed translate to competitive advantage in knowledge-based industries. Those of you who already have this, you're on the bandwagon, I know, because you have a team that's running with this. You've transferred accountability over there. And let me say again, I'm not saying you don't make any decisions, because there's always going to be that decision that comes back, or they talk to you about it, because it includes a lot of different working parts. But many of you who have this team, you are blessed to have this team because you know that they're making those decisions. You're comfortable with it. And when it doesn't seem to go right, you're bringing those ideas up, and those ideas are being listened to and discussed among experts who really are and do care about that company. Let's move a little further into the shifting decision-making responsibilities to the team. So let's say you've got good people, but you're not quite there yet. You haven't shifted those responsibilities over to the team. You still feel like you're answering making a lot of decisions and giving approvals on stuff that really maybe you don't feel like you need to be doing. They have the expertise to do that. And some cultures, that's what you're doing right here, is shifting that culture. So let's talk about this a little more. First off, shifting decision-making theories. So we're going to talk about some theories that are here. Some of these theories have been built over the last several years, talking about being able to empower your team. And so I wanted to talk about some of these theories just to show you some research-based information on some of this, because I think it's super important to understand this isn't pie in the sky. This is stuff that people are actually using in running projects and being able to pass that along. And so you can have less management, less executives, because your team's making more of the decisions. So we're going to talk about some of these. We're going to talk about the self-management continuum, which is some of the research, Hackman's conditions for effective teams, Wilford and Byon's group development model, and Tannenbaum and Schmidt leadership continuum. So all of these are research models that people have used in being able to shift some of this authority over. All of these are not project management, though, but they are team oriented, where leadership has shifted it over. So let's break it down real quick here and give you some research on this. So let's start with the first one, which is self-management continuum. This is Pierce, Mann, and shared leadership. Teams can move through stages of shared decision making. So they gave you some of the stages. Maybe you've used something like this. You might not even call it this. It doesn't matter. But you've moved your people from where they are to making decisions over several steps. And so traditional management, the leader makes the decision. And there's not anything wrong with that in the early stages. And if you're in that right now, that's fine to start there. But that's not where you're wanting. You want to duplicate yourself so that other people are being able to make the decision. Then you have participative management. The leader consults with the team. And then you have self-managing teams where the team makes most operational decisions. It's the self-managing teams that you're really trying to go to in your organization to speed your projects up the most. Your team making the decision will allow you to have a higher delivery and higher success rate on your project, because it's not any of this start-stop stuff. And those of you who are in the field, you know what I'm talking about. We're working like dogs, and then all of a sudden you're going back and you're waiting for a decision. We work like dogs, and then we're waiting for another decision. And that's that start-stop that we're talking about. Also, self-designing teams. So this is even a higher maturity that many of you in Scrum and Agile are seeing, or if you have a cross-functional team, then you're moving into that direction, because these folks will all of a sudden decide within the team how they're going to team up to solve a problem. And so management didn't say anything to them. They decided these three people need to work on this. So the team makes decisions about membership, structure, processes, and so they make the call and solve the problem instantly with that. Usefulness. It maps the long-term progression toward highly autonomous owner-like teams, because they're making the decision. So here's the thing. Some of the reasons why people have turnover is they feel like they're being micromanaged to death, and they feel like they're being choked to death. And if you've ever worked in that situation, and I worked in that situation, I didn't stay. I started looking for something different when that happened years ago. And so if you've worked in that, you think, man, you are just smothering me because I can't even blink my eyes without you telling me to blink. And that's what you're wanting to get away from. And you haven't duplicated yourself. You haven't gotten any of your skills into the workplace. Let's look at the graphic for this. This is a self-management continuum. Notice where traditional management is. Notice where self-governing teams are. Now, you might be in the middle here someplace, and that's fine. But what you're really wanting to do is duplicate yourself so that you've got people making your kind of decisions, but they're making it themselves. And then you're managing them and you're leading them. But once again, they're reporting to you more than you're making the decision. And so this is self-management continuum. All right, let's look at Hackman's condition for effective teams. This is another research theory on teams. Richard Hackman is the theorist who argued that decision-making power can only be transferred when these conditions are met. And so since we're talking about that transference piece, and that seems to be the struggle because it's a cultural anchor for us so many times, so clear boundaries. So their theory says team knows its authority limits. Well, your team might know that right now. So if they're being micromanaged, they know it. There are no authority limits for them. They can't sneeze without having permission. That's not going to benefit the organization long term. Then notice compelling direction. The decision-making aligns with the goals, but once again, there's more oversight there. And then enabling structure, the roles, the norms, the resources all support that autonomy. And so if you're working someplace and you have the ability to make decisions, maybe not 100%, but you're making most of the decisions on a day-to-day basis, you like that capability and you like to be able to do that without having to ask permission. We all do. Your team will too, once they understand what they're doing. With Hackman also, they have a supportive context. Organizations provide information, tools. So you coach them, you talk about some of the challenges they had. Let's say they had a big mess up. So what do? You talk about it, but it's not talked about from a discipline standpoint. It's talked about from a learning standpoint. What would we do different from that? And then also expert coaching. Guidance ensures decisions are effective because you're coaching people, which is going to increase your trust, is going to increase their trust, and is also going to increase their willingness to take that chance working for the organization and making those decisions. And usefulness highlights organizational prerequisites for empowering team level decision making. So we're not talking about blind decision making. We're not talking about blind transference here. We're talking about train your people and equip your people and transfer it over, and then equip them some more and transfer some more over. So you really are doing it in stages. All right, this is the graphic for Hackman's conditions for effective teams. So notice he talks about clear boundaries. Many organizations have that, but they still control it with permission project management. And so that's fine to start with, but over time, you're wanting to be able to start building it and getting it to where you're coaching your team, not making every decision for your team. And here's the thing, they'll escalate stuff that's really beyond the span of their authority that they think is their authority, and they just want to double check something. Something weird has happened with the project or it's connected to another project. And so they'll come to you to have a meeting saying, here's what we're thinking. What do you think on this? And they'll ask for input. But the bottom line is they're making most of those decisions. All right, let's go to the next one. And this is Wilford and Byon's group development. And so as they look at team development and making shifts for authority and stuff, they suggest teams evolve in how they handle authority and decision making. Dependency phase. Teams look to the leader for direction and control. You spoon feed that answer most of the time because they're new, they don't have the experience, and so they're trying to learn the ropes, okay? And that's fine in the very beginning. They don't know anything. Tell them what to do, tell them how to do it. But over time, you start shifting that over to where they're making more and more of those decisions. And so then they come back with the next stage, counter dependency, fight or flight. The team resists or tests authority. They start questioning decisions. As people start moving in that direction of group development, you'll see people start questioning some of the decisions. We've all been on those teams probably where somebody made the decision and the team, in talking unofficially, made a statement such as, I don't believe that's going to work at all. I don't believe that's a right solution. It was never escalated back to management. Maybe you didn't tell anybody else, but the team had enough expertise to look at that solution and compare it to the problem and say, I don't think that's going to be it. But the vice president said, do it, and we're doing it. And so you run that solution. They talk about trust and cohesion. Shared responsibility emerges. Decisions begin to be shared. And this is a huge communication piece, obviously. I'm sharing what I think is good, what I think is bad. You're sharing it as well. And the thing is that when we disagree, it's not an attack on anybody's character. We just happen to not agree on that point, and we're listening and looking at other team members. What do they bring to the table? Work performance stage. The team self-directs decision-making, aligns it with objectives. How does this fit our objective? How does this fit our goals? Your team finds out that they can align that project and those objectives and those solutions to that goal. Usefulness shows the psychological readiness of the group to accept autonomy. They're being able to make their decision. So if you're in a situation now and you're making your decisions, compare that to when somebody was spoon feeding you every answer and you were doing it in piecemeal based on their approval. It's like daylight and dark with both of those. All right, so this is what Winford-Byon's group model looks like. Notice it starts off with dependency phase, and they even do the little counter dependency or fight or flight kind of thing, because you're getting people out of their comfort zone. They're making a decision. They haven't made decisions before, at least not there. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, they start trusting what they're doing because experience goes up, coaching has gone up, their skills have gone up. And then eventually, this model is calling it the work performance stage. They're working, they're performing, they're making those decisions. And that's what you're wanting to do to reinforce that. And longevity typically is going to be reinforced here. Let's talk about the last one, which is Tannenbaum and Schmidt leadership continuum. You're trying to transfer it over, remember, to the team. So this classic model illustrates a spectrum of leadership styles showing how decision-making shifts from manager-driven to team-driven. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where we are in project management right now. That's the reason why many of you are using Agile and Scrum, is so that the team can call the shot and speed the project up and get something to that customer faster. And that's what we have to do. If we're still always having to run the information up for approvals, we're not speeding things up. So if you're struggling with that speed, look at being able to transfer some of this. So let's break it apart here and go do a little deep dive. So manager-centered decisions. A manager makes decisions, announces them. Manager sells the decisions to the team. So there is no trust of the team. I don't care about what my team thinks or doesn't think. I'm spoon feeding them the answer. That's going to be the slowest section of your project to be able to do, because what's happening? That one person, that's your becomes your bottleneck. All answers, all solutions go through that person. Let's go a little further. What about shared decisions? A little bit better. And you might be doing this as they're learning the new skills and learning what the company is. And maybe they were new and now they're 7 or 8, 10 months into it. And now they're starting to learn some things. So manager presents ideas, invites questions. Many consult before finalizing it, but the manager presents a problem, gets suggestions, and then decides. This second stage here, notice in their model, the second stage, who's making the decision? That's what it comes down to, still the manager. Now, it's better in that people gave ideas, but the manager is the one who's still making that decision. Look at the third piece of this, the team-centered decision. This is what we're wanting to do. So manager defines limits, allows the group to decide, and the manager permits the team full freedom within the organizational boundaries. And so what you're wanting to do is allow that team to start learning and growing. However, you cannot expect perfection. You and I don't have perfection. So we can't have perfection on the team, and then the moment they mess something up, it's like, well, I knew they couldn't do it in the first place. So, well, that's crazy. They've got to grow. They've got to expand. Usefulness here is it helps leaders visualize the progressive transfer of power from authoritarian to participative. Everything you and I are doing with our hybrid projects and with our Agile and Scrum projects are going in that direction of where you need decision makers on that team, not just worker bees. If I'm wanting to run 100% of it traditional, you still need decision makers on there. Now, you still might be making the decision as a project manager, but I still want to hear what people think, what they see about that project. Because once again, I don't think I know everything about that project, and I bet you think the same thing. And so you want to hear that type of information. All right, so here's the Cannonball and Baum and Schmidt continuum that they were talking about. So notice over here to the far left, the manager makes the decision, announces it. And then notice all the way to the right, the manager permits subordinates to function within limits defined by the superior. And so they're still making decisions. It's still within framework. We all have to report to somebody in most cases. And so you're still going to have to report something to somebody, but you're allowing them to make most of the decisions and want them to, because they're making good decisions. And their decisions most of the time, if they've got the same information and the same stuff that we have in trying to decide, they'll make the same decision, or sometimes a better decision than we will make. Now, if we're holding stuff back and we're not letting them know anything and we're not giving them all the, behind the scenes of what's happening or all the additional information or all the goals of the organization, they can't make a decision on that because they don't have all the information. Their decisions we are setting that decision up for failure. So we've got to get away from that. All right, diagnosing the readiness for decision delegation. How do you know, as you're making that transition, that your team's ready to be able to start receiving this and start making these decisions? So it assesses internal factors that signal organizational preparedness for distributing decision authority. Maturity models in project governance is one of those. Cultural dimensions, leadership alignment, psychological safety and trust in teams. All of those would be some of the checklists that we would look at. The team's working well together. They're disagreeing agreeably, but yet they're still, when they make a decision, they're going forward. The culture has shifted to where we're okay with people making decisions. It doesn't have to always be run up the chain of command. And we're maturing in how we run projects. All of that helps with these things so that you have the capability of being able to think, you know what, we're heading in the right direction. More coaching, more training, more support, and that team's going to be better tomorrow than they are today. Strategic triggers for transition. It identifies moments, pressures, or trends that categorize the shift. If you're not wanting to make the shift, you're going to be out of sync over time. Our environments are constantly becoming more skeleton in nature. And so I bet you have open positions in your organization that the approval has not been given yet for people to be able to be hired. I bet you there's people, you're running a skeleton crew still trying to do all the projects and all these type of things. And so that's one of the reasons why you need people to be able to make the decisions so that you've duplicated yourself into that team. So several pieces of this are going to make a difference here. Digital transformation, agile scaling is going to be part of it. And so digital transformation is being driven right now, as you know, with AI. AI, which is going to be the big data that's coming in for all of our situations. It will change our workforce in the next 24 months. It will, and is already changing it across the world. When I trained the Ukrainian project managers last year, I was shocked that they were ahead of us in how they were using AI. And so the Ukrainian project managers who are in the middle of a war field are using AI, and we're almost 12 to 14 months ahead of us in how they used AI. And they're in a war effort over here, and that they were using AI so much more than what we are here. And so I was just shocked because I thought, well, I'm training Ukrainian project managers on how to use artificial intelligence, and I'm going to show them something great. And it was a great class, and they were wonderful. But then I find out they've been using it longer than most of the people that was in our class, and we're already applying it to different things. And then it fits into this idea of crisis management, remote collaboration, having that ability to get somebody on the video and to be able to talk about some of these things and how we're doing some things and get some input is going to be something that's tremendous. Some roles of executive leadership in empowering teams. Now, needless to say, this feels like a threat sometimes to some of the executives because, well, what do I do if I'm not deciding everything? You're equipping everybody. You're coaching everybody. You're empowering people. You are reproducing yourself. You are a better leader reproducing yourself than making every decision, because what's going to happen when you leave and nobody has made a decision? As a manager, what's going to happen if you leave or get promoted and nobody has ever made a decision? Let's go back to our teenage child that goes off to college. What do you think is going to happen to your teenage child who never had a decision, never made a decision, and they show up at college? Oh my gosh, they are crazy. And they're crazy because they've never made a decision. Now they get to make every decision. So what happens is that you typically, as a parent, what did you do? You started building those decisions. You started making them take responsibility, and especially in those last couple of years of high school, you started making them make decisions for stuff. And it doesn't mean they made every decision at college. They're still calling home. You're still supporting them financially. They're driving your car probably. But the point is, it was cocooned to where they were being able to make more decisions over time. I mean, what would you think if I told you that a few years ago, there was a lady that we knew that she was calling her son at college to get him up every morning because he's a hard sleeper? Oh my gosh, poke me in the eye. What you need that transition over there. Wouldn't that drive you nuts? And so you're thinking you did not transition this thing right. And I'm telling the honest to goodness truth, because when I heard that, I thought, there's no way I'm calling my kids when they were in college to wake them up. Now, if they were sick, you call and check on your kids. Of course, you love your kids and care. To wake them up, oh my gosh, no way. All right, so let's move on a little bit further. And if your mom called you to wake you up in college, I apologize. I'm not trying to offend you, but I just thought that was crazy. So, all right, let's go a little further. All right, so communication patterns in distributed decision models. When we talk about these and being a decision model or distributed decision model, so it reviews communication norms, flows, and breakdowns. So in order for you to have decisions made by your team, that means we've got to think differently about what communication they get. The old style was communicate on as need to know basis. You maybe have even heard that term. New style is you open up communication. Now, those of you who are working on your top secret type of projects, this is not something that automatically works for you in all these cases, because there are some things that are going to be only open to certain people or who have a certain classification with top secret. I get it. But typically, we want to open up as much as we can over here for the project information to the team so that they can make those decisions. And so if they don't have the communication, they don't have the research, they don't have the information, they're not going to make good decisions. So transparency, traceability in decisions, feedback loops, escalation channels, cross-team coordination, synchronization, all of that is going to be very important for your team. And here's the cool part. You've got Generation X and you got millennials, and those are the dominant people that are in the workplace today, and they will do this. Your millennials are the most educated. They also have never worked in the workplace without technology. They feel comfortable with all of this, and so that synchronization, that communication fits very well for them. All right, training and capacity building for team autonomy. So sometimes the old mindset was, I'm working here, I don't have to think, my boss makes the decision for me, and so we're good to go. That's the wrong decision today, because that's not what companies want. I want somebody who's going to make decisions. You're going to want somebody who's going to do that. So it emphasizes the skill building and behavioral adjustments necessary for effective delegation. So decision-making training, critical thinking, how can they make a decision? Do they even know how to make a decision? That's part of what you're coaching and training and passing over to them. So you're letting them see you. You're letting them see how you made the decision. You're being transparent of what you're looking for. Conflict resolution and facilitation. Because you're making these changes, you're going to find people who have little meltdowns over different stuff. There's going to be conflict. And you'll find people are going to be resistant to some of this. Some of you on the call this morning might say, yeah, there's no way I want this to happen where I am. I'm going to call every shot. Well, you can do that, but you could become the bottleneck. That's the warning for it. Could become the bottleneck because you're calling every shot. Doesn't it make more sense to at least consider, can't you duplicate yourself and put your skills in someone else and be able to be a cheerleader for that person as they continue to grow? And then last would be scenario planning and simulation exercises. What kind of scenario are we dealing with? What are some of the scenarios they potentially could deal with? Taking a scenario right now, this morning, there are people who use some of these things that we do with our webinar, and they train their people all over the country, and actually in Canada is the one I'm talking about. And so this lady who is a PMO director brings her PM project managers together. They train them every month on the webinar, and they do a scenario plan for a situation to connect all the stuff we talked about that month. And that's how she keeps her project managers trained. This is just a piece of her monthly meeting with all of her project managers. So let's move a little further again and go into monitor performance without micromanagement. So creating a shift from operator to enabler. Now, enabler here is a good thing. I know typically when we talk about people enabling, it's always a negative thing because we talk about it from an alcohol or drug or bad decisions or whatever. But here we're not talking about like that. So the operator is the first, do the work, approve the ideas, strategize the next step. That's going to be that control piece, okay? And then when you think about the enabler over here, this is where you are training, coaching, supporting, listening for conclusions, strategizing the next steps. And so what we're trying to do in this graphic is shift it from you making the call to them making that call. And once again, it's not going to happen with a light switch. It's going to happen over time. And in the beginning, you are overseeing it. But what happens as they start making more and better decisions, you start backing off more and more with that. Guardrails to avoid the micromanagement. So maybe you work in a wonderful place and you don't have any micromanagers. That is absolutely awesome. And maybe your company has already caught this vision. That's awesome. But that's not the case across the board with everybody. So self-awareness practices. So executives must audit their own behavior. Am I a micromanager of all the decisions? If I am, is it possible I could become the bottleneck? Could be. So am I giving feedback on a style rather than substance? Am I inserting myself into tactical decisions unnecessarily? Why do I have to make the decision if I think their decision's good? Support their decision, brag on their decision. I don't have to give my piece into it. They're making a great decision. Best practices, adopting a spotlight review approach. Only intervene if red, support if amber, and stay back if it's green. And so only if it was a monster, costly situation would we be stepping into it. And this is a shift for our thought process as well, how we coach, how we mentor, how we manage, because it means that we have to look at it totally different as well. Also, practical tool, creating an executive decision journal, track our interventions. How many times did you have to intervene into some of these situations this past month? If you're intervening more than 20% of the time, then you might be more on the micromanaging side than you want to admit, because 80% of the decisions are being made by them. So are you micromanaging more than that? You might not even see it. It might be a blind spot, but your people see it, and your people are seeing how it's happening. So let's look at encouraging innovation and ownership among the team members. That's where you're headed with. And so let's start about psychological ownership. So transfer of responsibility, not just the tasks. That's a distinct difference. So a task means they're doing something, but I'm overseeing what they're doing, and then they're seeking my approval for what they're doing. That's not what we're talking about. So true empowerment requires executives to transfer accountability, not just the work or not just the duties. Ownership means the team feels the success and consequences of outcomes. So when they've made the decision, they put the solution into place, they've worked out and solved that problem, there is a certain amount of excitement, there's a certain amount of fulfillment because what I thought did work, and we've got that. If I do yours, what you thought I implemented, but it worked as well. Not near as motivational for your team. The other piece would be the best practice involving teams in goal setting, metric definitions. They help design their performance measures, which increases commitment. So what happens, they're able to look and brainstorm, and management might be involved in this, of what are the metrics we need to be looking at over here for solving this problem, or even measuring the results of people. Expert practice, applying co-creation of charters. Team writes their own working agreement, accountability framework approved by leadership. Now, when they're talking about their co-creator of charters here, they're really talking about team charter, not a project charter. Team charter is the new term that many of us would write for our team of how we're going to work together, how we're going to hold each other accountable, where we're meeting, all those type of things. So that's become a new term since 2023, with changes through PMI. And so it's called a team charter. You have a project charter, which approves the project, points project manager, gives you initial funding. But team charter is how we're going to work together. And it includes stuff like our code of conduct. Failures to consider in transferring decisions to teams. There are failures, and your people will have some failures. They're not perfect. You and I are not perfect, but they will have some failures with some of this. So here are some of the pitfalls that I thought was interesting. Lack of alignment. So they make decisions that maybe don't align as much with the goals and strategic direction of the organization as you hoped. So team decisions drift away from management priorities. That's good. That's going to happen or could happen. So what do? You make sure it's crystal clear. These are the priorities, and this is the priorities 1, 2, 3, 4 that we need to be working on this next quarter. And that's one of the reasons why you might have a quarterly meeting, is to talk about the quarterly priorities and just make sure everybody hears them again. Insufficient skills. That's going to be one that you have just because you've got good people you've hired, but they don't have the skill set. So decisions made without proper background, without proper expertise. This is a learning place. And so as you put training into them and equip them and coach them and let them shadow people who have the experience, you're going to benefit greatly from here, because that bad decision was because they didn't know. But now that you've equipped them, they know. So they're going to make good decisions with that. Overstepping authority. The team acts beyond the boundaries given to them. So that does make a difference for you to see that. I see that my AI, who made my graphic here, gave me 2 2s on there on that particular one. You can't trust AI on everything. So anyway, I just spotted that as well. But the point is, they might overstep authority. So making sure that they understand the guardrails of what they can and cannot do is going to be important. And you can do that in that quarterly meeting as well. Manager overrides. The leaders step in and reverse team choices. There's going to be a time that all of us have this happen. Okay. But if it's happening over and over and over again, you're going to demotivate that team. The team's going to stop making decisions. And they basically are going to go back to the manager and say, tell us what to do, and we'll speed things up from that way, because we're deciding, we're getting ready to do it, and then you're trumping it, which makes us change gears to replan something else. And then fragmented information, poor flow of critical knowledge across roles. We're not getting the right information. We're not being communicated to by the right people. And so what happens is management gets it, or managers get it, or supervisors get it, but we don't. Our project managers get it, but we don't. And so that's just a matter of making sure that people understand that we should have access to all of these. So lack of alignment solutions. Let's do a little bit of a deep dive on this. So scenario-based alignment reviews. So instead of static alignment checks, run quarterly scenario simulations where teams present alternative decisions against shifting markets or organizational priorities. And the team can talk about different solutions and different type of outcomes that they see for this. This tests decision robustness and sharpens strategic awareness. It allows you to have more confidence of your management, that your team understands what those particular outputs and goals are for the organization. Overstepping authority. What are some things? So delegated authority charters. So move beyond generic RACI charts. And so RACI charts you're familiar with, responsible, accountable, consultant, informed. Great tool. Create dynamic authority matrices that adjust with project phases. And so how much authority do they have in phase 1 of the project? How much do they have in phase 3? And so those can be discussions. And maybe phase 3 has so many regulatory pieces to it that management and executives need to walk through every one of those decisions, because it's aligning with this, with that regulatory piece, and they don't want to miss anything and be fined. So, okay, that's fine. You're involved heavy in 3 because of that. But can they make decisions in 1, 2, and 4? Those other type of phases, maybe. So broader autonomy during experimentation, tighter governance at execution. So that helps you narrow down some of the overstepping there. Manager override solutions. It's going to happen. There's going to be something that they find out right now that they do. Psychological safety contracts. So you establish explicit leadership commitments Default to the team decisions unless risk exceeds the defined threshold. So if I know something they don't, I can trump it, but it's because what I know or what I just found out is far bigger than what any of them know, and the risk is super high and going to cost us a ton of money if we don't go in this particular direction. However, what I could have done also, the moment I found out, talk to the team and make them part of that decision. And then now it's us making the decision to where I've still transferred some of that decision making over to them. Shadow governance boards in high stake programs create a board of peers who review override decisions for bias, ensuring leaders are not understanding teams out of habit or not undermining teams out of habit or fear. So is it that I'm trumping them because my decision has to be the one that makes that decision, or am I trumping them because of my own bias that I bring to the table, or my own ego and pride that I bring to the table? I'm the boss, and so I'll make that decision. Is that happening? If it is, then I need some coaching and training, because I should be willing to give that power away and give that authority away and become a person who's duplicating it in others rather than trying to hold on to it. Also, fragmented information solution. So context, rich handoffs, standardized knowledge transfers with not just data, but decision context, embedding assumptions, trade-offs, risk logs, and structured templates. This prevents data from becoming divorced from the rationale. We want our people to have data-driven decision-making. That's the verbiage that we use. That's what we say we want. However, data might not mean the same thing to me that it does you, because I have less experience. So I want to learn from that. I want to learn, what are you looking at in data? And then once I understand what you're looking at, I'm looking probably at those same things. And now I'm reading and interpreting the data correctly to come up with the right decision. But what we want to do is make sure that we're getting the proper data and that we understand that data that we're getting. Insufficient skills solution. So just-in-time knowledge injection. I love this, because we know what just-in-time is. When we talk about it from a resource standpoint, the resources arrived yesterday that I need today, just in time. Well, this is doing it from knowledge injection. So your people are getting an injection of the knowledge of experience from experienced people at the moment they need to make the decision. So pair teams with embedded AI knowledge agents that surface industry regulations, benchmarks, or lessons learned at the moment of decision making. Now, I went ahead and went in the direction of AI knowledge agents here. It might be a human person in your environment, because AI might not be the knowledge agent, but over time, this will become the common thing. We will use AI like an additional agent, and we will ask questions. We will do a risk analysis with that agent to see, does that AI agent think of anything different than what we're thinking of? Do they have a solution different than what we do? And you want that, because you're going to get this in a matter of 5 seconds, and you're not having to attend another meeting, and AI is going to make some suggestions. And you have the ability to spit the bones out and get rid of it instantly. Also, decision competency heat maps. Use analytics to assess decision patterns across teams, identifying where training, mentoring, or cross-functional pairing is required. And so you start looking at good decisions compared to bad. Why was that a bad one? Well, maybe we need to train them in critical thinking. Maybe we need to train them in being able to make a decision. And so putting those type of pieces together to where you're training those gaps that you sense from some of your people is going to be pretty awesome. All right, the last piece is going to be adjusting methodologies to fit the project size and scope. So you got a smaller project. Some of this stuff is going to happen really quick. You're going to be done with the project in a matter of a few months, and you've got 3 or 4 people working on it, or maybe just 2 of you working on it. So that's not going to need the structure that some of the bigger projects are going to need. So when we look at this is getting ready to adjust the methodology. And so that part of tailoring the methodology we've talked about before, there's no need for us to have all this methodology that we're using in every project for some of the smaller projects. So ideas, processes, outcomes, challenges, regulations, a lot of pieces to this. And then what you're wanting to do is move over into the criteria, which is going to make a difference on your project management methodology. How much methodology do I need for this project to get it out the door? If I don't have enough methodology, then we're going to have scope creep if it's traditional, and then we're going to have the definition of done running rampant if it's on the Agile or Scrum side. If I have too much, then I've bottlenecked it with the methodology, and so what we're doing, we're filling out more paperwork than we really need for a project this size. And then what you're trying to do is deliver this type of output to that customer as quick as possible. All right, and then, of course, you're getting feedback for every part of that, which is going to be tremendous for you to have. So let me talk about some things. Excited. We've got one more month of webinars for this year, and we'll finish up for 2025. That's going to be on data-driven decision making in project management, leveraging metrics for success. So we're going to emphasize the data-driven. This is a much bigger driver since 2022 with PMI. We've already listed our 2026 webinars for the year, and so in January we'll be talking about reinventing the PMO from policing projects to driving growth. And so that'll be coming out in January. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on the PMO. And then, of course, we've got all of them listed. If you're wanting to sign up for those for 2026, all of them will be registered with PMI as well. Also, we've got our virtual PMP boot camps. We're running about 97% first-time passing rate on the PMP boot camps. We have 6 of them in 2026. Our last one for December will be December 8th through 11. This is using the PMI material. We are an ATP with PMI, so we are using their material for people to take the test. They will be changing the test next year. We've been notified of that just this past week. And so they will be changing the test in the middle of next year. And so that means that's a whole new learning curve for all of us on what are they emphasizing, what are they not emphasizing. Right now, you do not have calculations on the PMP test. And so you calculate one thing, and that's the PERT. And you do not have calculations, and you do not have a decision tree to have to calculate. You do not have CPI to calculate SPI. None of the calculations are there. So if you're somebody who struggles with calculations, this is a good time for you to get it taken before they make that adjustment, because they could be going back to that. So here are all our PMP boot camps. We also will have 3 mastermind groups for next year. Our 3 mastermind groups are for our mastermind groups for the PMP. And so these are people who are thinking about doing the PMP, but they're wanting to understand a little bit more about it. They're wanting to look and see, do they have the experience for it, and those type of things. And so this is free. This is, you'll notice it's a week long is what we have listed here. It's really about an hour a day or 45 minutes a day for the week. I have videos they're going to watch to understand whether or not they qualify. I do 2 group calls to where they can ask any questions. So we do 2 Zoom calls, one normally in the beginning of the week, one at the end. And then we give away a free scholarship to one person who's in each group. So what you see here, there'll be 3 people who get to attend the seminar next year for the PMP, and so they come as our guests with a scholarship. So 3 people will be able to work on their PMP from attending this. But it's good for people who don't know a lot. There's a lot of questions that people have behind the scenes on what can I count, how do I fill out the application, and all those different pieces. And so we answer all those questions in the mastermind, and that's 100% free. And also, if I can help you in any way, don't hesitate to send me an email, and I'll be glad to get back with you or something. Or if you're wanting some specialized training with some of the things we're doing, we can talk about some of that. I'm excited about next year. We are still out of Springfield. We're still doing. We're semi-retired now with Wanda and I, and so we limit the dates, and so I still have dates open for next year. And so I'm going back to Friends is who I'm going back to. And so if you don't like me, please don't bring me back in. But if you like me and you want me to come back, I'll be glad to come. Okay, because that's what we've been doing the last couple of years, going back to Friends. So it's been fun. So let me bring this thing to a closure here this morning, and thank you so much for being part of this. I hope you enjoy these. I hope they're beneficial to you. We are going to be kicking off, the one thing I want to mention to you, we're going to be kicking off on TikTok and on Facebook called 7-Minute PMP Exam Mastery. And so it's going to be focused on the PMP test, and it's going to be under 7 minutes. And so it's just going to be little tips on how to pass the PMP. And so we're going to be rolling that out for 2026. And so you'll have a chance to see some of those if you're interested. So it'll be under 7 minutes talking about something about the PMP test, or how to study for the PMP test, or how to be specific about something. So that will be rolling out to help some of the people who are trying to get their PMP. So let me close this out. Let me thank you so much for being here. You got Thanksgiving around the corner, and oh my gosh, what is it, 41 days or 40 days to Christmas? And so best time of the year. So I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, a wonderful time as you buy your Christmas presents, and I'll see you next month. Okay. So see you. Thank you so much for being here. Bye, guys. Enjoy a great Thanksgiving. Bye.